Hello, everybody. It's great to be here live on Facebook with you today from the beautiful city of Baltimore in this great confinement lockdown time. And I've received quite a few questions from all of you, but I would like to start with the questions that are from children. We have some great questions here, and it's always great to see children get interested in classical music and what's happening there. We have the first question: why do we call it an orchestra? Well, we call it an orchestra because the term comes from the Latin orchestra, which was itself borrowed from the Greek, and it comes down from the word archeomai, which means to dance. So because originally, I guess the first orchestras were groups of musicians that were there to make people dance. And there is actually always maybe a dancing quality to music. And I can share a personal experience that when the only time and the first time that I conducted a concert in Africa, people started to clap and dance during the music. So it is definitely a natural quality of the music that it makes us want to dance. Looking at my questions here, how do you decide which instrument will be in a concert and how many? Well, that's kind of decided by the pieces we choose. The composers decide to put more or less instruments, decide whether there's going to be a clarinet or a trombone or violas or cellos, and then we go by that according to what we call the nomenclatura, the instruments that the composers choose. Why does an orchestra have so many violins? Do they all play the same thing? So first, why does an orchestra have so many violins? The orchestra has so many violins because the violins have a higher frequency, let's say, than the double basses. Higher frequencies carry less far, and therefore we need more of them to carry the tune. The violins tend to have the melody. They kind of like, I would say, the soprano. You will notice that sometimes in a choir you see more sopranos than basses, and yet they sound equally loud. That's because the lower frequency, the longer wavelength, carries farther. So that is the reason. Do they all play the same thing? Well, sometimes yes, sometimes not. We have first and second violins. In the past, they used to be disposed as first violins on the left, second violins on the right. Now they are right next to each other. So when they were on each side of the orchestra, we had the stereophonic effect, but not as good as a blend. Now we have a better blend by them being together most of the time. Of course, some orchestras still sit them the old-fashioned way, but we have lost the stereophonic effect. So it's a give and take. But even the first violin sometimes can be divided into several sections, and they can be divided in 4 or even 8, depending on the piece. So do they all play the same thing? Yes, sometimes, and no, some of the time. What is the difference between the violin and the viola? So I'm lucky that I am on lockdown with someone that plays both, my wife Daphne, and she's accepted to come show us the difference between a violin and a viola. The violin is a smaller instrument. It doesn't go as low, but it goes higher. The strings are tuned G, D, A, E, and the viola is larger. It's kind of tuned like a cello, but an octave above. We C, G, D, E. C, G, D, A, sorry. And we're going to ask Daphne to show us the violin and then show us the viola.
Hello, all. So you can see here the difference of size that he was mentioning. The violin is smaller, the viola is larger so that it can play lower notes with longer strings. And now I'm going to play a moment on the violin. And on the viola.
Can we have the lowest note on the viola?
The lowest is a C.
Yes, very good. Thank you so much,
You're
Daphne.
welcome.
And what does it mean to be first chair in an orchestra? Well, first chair is the person sitting in front of the section. It's kind of the leader. That's the person that helps everybody in that section glue together and play with the same intention, play at the same time, play with the same bow stroke, play with the same sound, play with the same dynamic. Basically, yeah, the leader, the person that sets the tone for the whole section. How do the musicians know what notes to play? They have a score in front of them, and so they know what note to play. The score indicates not only the pitch, the height of the note, but it indicates the rhythm, it indicates the dynamic, it indicates the articulation, and sometimes the intention or the character. And then how to play, that's how to interpret exactly these things. Of course, there is always the discussion of whether we are executing or we are interpreting. And of course, most of our work should be to really faithfully execute the score. And at the same time as we faithfully execute it, that becomes also in itself an interpretation. Why do some concerts have a lot of musicians, but of concerts fewer musicians? Yes. If we take the Symphony of 1,000 by Gustav Mahler, the legend was that there was 1,000 people on stage. I don't know if it was just a marketing pitch to sell the concert, if there was really 1,000 people on stage, but there is frequently well over 500 people on stage to play that symphony. And then I could have a concert with one pianist or one cellist only on stage and playing a solo concert. So yeah, all combinations are possible. A concert with 12 people, with 25, with 80, with 200, everything can be there. Why? Because different pieces require different configurations. Is one better than the other? No, you can go to a wonderful piano recital by one genius pianist, as well as a wonderful 300 people on stage concert by a great orchestra and choir. What does the conductor do? Well, that's like really the $1 million question, because we conductors don't even know quite what we do, right? The conductor is the coordinator, is the person that sort of centralizes the information and tries to redistribute it appropriately in the right time, and tries to get everybody to really sync their playing, tries to know what the composer feels, and tries to know what the musician feel about the piece. He comes with his own feeling for the piece, but he also listens to the musician's feeling for the piece, and tries to create that synergy that goes back and forth between him and the orchestra and the audience, to try to create a performance that comes alive, and that comes really from as much listening as doing. Really, both of them are very important. So that's it for our children question. We are gonna go to our adult question that are just as good. Does the Mid-Atlantic Symphony hold rehearsals open to the public? What are the pros and cons, assuming this can be done with social distancing? The MSO rehearsals are more or less always open to the public. One just has to ask and can attend. What are the pros and cons? I only see pros. I love that people can attend rehearsal and see how things are prepared. In some ways, the preparation and the concert are two different things. They are in some ways not of really quite the same nature. It's almost like in the concert is the realization of what was prepared in rehearsal. In rehearsal, it's bringing all the material elements of the piece together, and the magic happens at the concert in this relationship with not only the audience, with the composer, and with really the fact that it is a performance brings out something different out of everyone. Assuming this can be done with social distancing, well, that's not a question. I don't really know if it can be done with social distancing. Let's hope that we can find a way. Are you able to hold rehearsals in this time of lockdown? If so, how? No, we are not able to hold rehearsal yet. We're able to do a lot of planning. We are really thinking forward on how will we present concerts if the lockdown continues or if there's still social distancing. And we are looking to how we will deal with these conditions, and how we will, basically how we will be able to present performance with social distancing still in place in the near future. Do you think the social isolation will have an impact on the type of music patrons will want to hear at their first concert after the quarantine? For example, do you believe they might want to hear powerful and inspirational music as opposed to prayerful and reverent? Would this be a consideration in the music you select for your next concert? Well, after every major catastrophe like what we're going through, there is always a desire for great positivity. And that, of course, seeps into the arts. We can definitely hear the very excited music of the 1920s, which were following the great disaster of World War I and of the Spanish flu, our COVID-19 predecessor. And think of the 50s, right after World War II, where everything was very, 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 very excited and positive, where all the music had to be very energetic. So I do think that this will have an impact, of course, because it will have an impact on all of society, and if it will have an impact on everybody's mood wanting to be up. So definitely it will have an impact. What will we choose the pieces differently? Well, the 2021 season is already planned, but I think it already fits that bill, and it's already a very exciting season with lots of upbeat music. What kind of training does conducting require? How old were you when you decided to become a conductor? Where did you study conducting? Well, conducting doesn't really require necessarily training for some, and can require training for others. For example, some very, very excellent world-class conductors have had very, very little trainings and were complete naturals at it. They were able to step in front of the orchestra, and with very little instruction, they would start and be great conductors. There is one of them who is director of a major orchestra in the US right now that apparently this first time conducting was fantastic. And some others go to teachers and need help in building their technique and building their art. Let's notice that in Greek, techne means both technique and art. That's always an interesting parallel. As far as how old was I when I decided to become a conductor? Well, I think I really firmly decided when I was about 17. But I first remember talking about being a conductor when I was 3 years old. So I'll give you the scene. I was at my grandmother's, and what I loved doing at the time was getting the pots and pans out and the wooden spoons, and I would do percussion on the pots and pans. And I asked my grandma, what job should I do when I grow up? And she said, you should be a conductor. That way you can travel a lot and do music. And that kind of stuck with me. And then I finally decided that I wanted to be a conductor. And then my mother told me, oh, that's good, because when you were born, I thought I really wanted you to be a surgeon or a conductor. I'm glad I chose conductor, because surgeon is not so much something I envisioned. But where did you study conducting? Well, I studied in several places. I started in the city of Marseille in France with a wonderful conductor whose name was Paul Mull. He was the son of Marcel Mull, the saxophone player, and really brilliant choir director named Roland Hérabédian. And then I went to Paris and studied with Jean-Sébastien Perrault. And then after I came to the US, to Northwestern and to Yale and to Peabody. So a lot of schools. And at Peabody, I really studied with a legendary conducting teacher, Gustav Meyer, who was really, really like, you know, legendary and absolutely amazing human being and teacher. And after that, I also did some studies with a Finnish conductor, Jorma Panula, who is just as legendary and is still thriving in his 90s, and is quite an amazing teacher. I would say that he impresses me also as a strength of nature. The man is in his 90s, cuts his wood every morning, and in the afternoon he's on Final, the computer software, transcribing music that he wrote in the 1950s, and learning a new computer software and chopping wood with an axe in your 90s. You know, that's what now I aspire to. Are there any particular conductor, living or dead, whose style you particularly admire? Well, you know, if one came to my number one, I guess it would be Claudio Abbado, and just as much admiration for Leonard Bernstein. With Claudio Abbado, I've always admired the flexibility, the ability to, you know, to go about every style in a beautiful way, and the independence of his hands, the natural and the genuine aspect of his emotional output, you know, always in taste, always in style, and yet so powerful, just really a giant of music. And with Leonard Bernstein, the absolutely amazingly genuine sound, the depth of the sound, the natural rhythmic output that he had. Gustav might often talk to us about, gave us quotes from Leonard Bernstein that were amazing. Marian Alsop, who was another one of my teachers, talked about him quite a bit, and you know, he's someone that, you know, really is up there for me. Of course, there are many others: Otto Klemperer, Wilhelm von Wangler, Herbert von Karajan, many others. But yeah, I would say if you made me choose one, I would have to hesitate between Claudio Abbado and Leonard Bernstein. In addition to leading the orchestra in rehearsals and performances, what other responsibilities and roles do you fulfill? Well, you know, I think the conductor job is really encompasses a lot of aspects of the life of the orchestra. Being a face of the orchestra in the community, meeting the patrons, promoting the orchestra, and especially promoting music in the community, really relating to the audience, relating to the donors, to the patrons. All these jobs are important, working with the board of directors, working with the musicians, working with the management. All of this makes the job very exciting. It just doesn't stop at the podium, although the podium is really the central place of the conductor, and that's where his most important job is. The other jobs are also very important. We cannot say that they are the most important, but they are just as important. I think in this day and age, an orchestra can really thrive if it has a music director that understands at least the other aspects, gives support to every team in the organization, and understands what their challenges are and what they need in order to move forward and bring the organization always one step higher. I think the vision of the music director for the orchestra and its role in the community is also crucial in that, as a good friend of mine says, people invest in ambition. And when the music director can have an ambitious vision and work with a team that has an ambitious vision as well, then they can all together bring the orchestra forward. First and foremost, a conductor, like any other leader, is a team builder. One has to find the right team members, and then one has to let them do their job and to, appreciate what they do overall. I have a question on this list that I'm keeping for the end, but I think I saw a few other questions. What have been the most influential conducting teachers you have had, and how has your conducting changed over the years? Well, I've had a lot of influential conducting teachers. I think I mentioned Gustav Mahler and I mentioned Jorma Panula. I should mention also a really wonderful musician and teacher, which is Viktor Yampolsky, that is a teacher at Northwestern University, and that has been really, in the short time that I studied with him, has been tremendously helpful. Who are some composers that you believe are underappreciated? Do you plan to perform any of their music in the near future? Oh, I don't know. This is maybe relative. Maybe, maybe Haydn is not as appreciated as Mozart, but I couldn't say that he's underappreciated. I do think that little by little, any great music finds its way to the stage and finds its way to the concert hall. And sometimes it takes a little longer, like someone like Mendelssohn was just like disappeared for centuries, or for at least a century, and is finally now recognized as the great genius that he was. And maybe some music have a language that is hard to grasp for audiences. I would say someone like Pierre Boulez is certainly not unknown, but he's not always, as appreciated as he could be. What are you doing to keep the music alive during COVID-19? Well, that's really what we're working on at the Mid-Atlantic Symphony, is to plan for the type of events and performances we'll have once rules ease a little bit. We saw that the Berlin Philharmonic gave a performance that was still confined, but was able to be streamed online with musicians having a certain distance from each other on the stage. And this is some of the contingency plans we're working on, and we hope will be possible to implement. How do you select the music that the orchestra will perform? Do the particular skills of the orchestra's members influence your decision? So let me first say, do the particular skills of the orchestra members? No. Musicians of the Mid-Atlantic Symphony are really wonderful. They can play anything. So the programming has to do more with keeping a balance. That's something that I definitely learned with Gustav Mahler, where the balance of styles and periods during a season and even on a concert is important. If you take care of the Baroque, you take care of the classical, you take care of the contemporary, you take care of a living composer, modern, romantic, and that you make sure that every area is covered. So that's That's one aspect of the balance of programming. The other thing, of course, that go in consideration is budget. Can we afford two Mahler symphonies this season for an orchestra like us, which is a regional orchestra? Can we afford this? Can we afford that? What's the return on investment? Okay, yeah, I really want to program this, but is it going to attract more audience? Is it worth it to program this at this point? The marketing will tell me, well, we may have a hard time marketing this. You may want to find another way. Can we do this and that Sibelius symphony at this point? And so there are lots of consideration, but I would say overall the main point is balance. Is the program going to be balanced? Are you going to give everybody what they like best, while keeping it really giving it a discovery aspect to the program? Is the person that like Baroque gonna get their fix? Is the person that likes classical gonna likes romantic, etc.? How are the musicians selected? Who does the selecting? What is the purpose of the conductor? When the conductor has a new piece of music, what kind of notes are you making on the music prior to rehearsal? Okay, so how are the musicians selected? Well, we are an orchestra that so far co-opts musicians on recommendations from current musicians, recommendations from outside people, and so they are selected mostly by myself, current members of the orchestra, and the management. They are selected, of course, for their musicianship and how well they play in the orchestra. What is the purpose of the conductor? We answered that. When the conductor has a new piece of music, what kind of notes are you making on the music? So the kind of notes I'm making on the music are not notes that are as much used in the performance as they are notes that are helping remember the music while you mark it. So they are a way of memorizing the music while you make your notes. So you mark over a crescendo, you mark over a staccato, you make your notes on your score, and by making them, that helps you remember. Also phrasing, number of bar groupings, like, okay, these 4 bars really go together. This is like more like 3 bars. This is more like 2 bars. And this kind of grouping helps structure the music. There are sometimes graphs as conductors that we make that are outside the score. And these graphs tend to represent the structure of the music and are sort of mnemotechnic way of remembering, but a way also of making an abstract of the structure of the piece. Isn't the piece played similarly by different orchestras? Well, very rarely. You could very rarely can find 2 orchestras with different conductors playing a piece the same way. Let's take an example from Leonard Bernstein. If you listen to his recording of anything that is recorded both with New York and with Vienna, even these sound completely different. And it probably, if you heard the performance on Thursday and then the performance on Friday, they would sound not entirely, but they would sound widely different. I remember hearing a Mahler 2 with Tim Rakhanov. Oh, I didn't mention Tim Rakhanov. Yeah, Tim Rakhanov is one of my great sources of inspiration. And the performance on Thursday and Sunday sounded entirely different. And they were both fantastic. While we are at it, there's one big influence, two big influences I forgot to mention. Yuri Timirkanov, who was music director of Baltimore Symphony while I was in school, and so while being a student, being able to see him work was immensely inspirational. And while I was a student in Chicago, Daniel Barenboim was the music director, and Pierre Boulez was the principal conductor, guest conductor. So that was really a golden period. And as a student, I was able to go to the rehearsals of Daniel Barenboim and the rehearsals of Pierre Boulez, and that was just tremendous. Is the conductor putting his, her spin touch on how the music will be performed? Absolutely. Everybody has a different heart rate. Everybody has a different pulse. Everybody has different emotions. Everybody's going to put their ethos and their being into the music in a different way. And that's why we have 7 billion people on the planet, and because we need that much variety. And it's really a wonderful thing. And are the musicians watching the conductor or reading their music while they perform? Well, they're doing both. They are reading the music, and sometimes with the corner of their eyes, or sometimes they will really look at the conductor. The conductor is giving them some information they need to keep performing, and the music is giving them some other information. So they kind of have to do both. The most important, as Jorma Panula says, the most important role of the conductor is, number one, do no harm. So do nothing that will prevent them from focusing on their job, and do everything you can to make their job easier, and make their job, make their job more successful. What is the purpose of the concertmaster? How did the first violinist become the concertmaster? So, the concertmaster has several qualities. First of all, let's define what is the concertmaster. The concertmaster is the first violin. So, is the first violin that's sitting in front of the first violin. The purpose of the concertmaster is to be the leader, right? Is the master of the concert. So, is the leader of the concert, we can say in some ways. But so you're going to say, well, wait a minute, isn't the conductor the leader of the concert? Well, yeah, in some sense, but the concertmaster is more translating the conductor's language in more concrete terms, in more exact terms. So if the conductor gives really the visual cue of how loud it should be, the concertmaster is going to give the auditory cue and a much more precise cue of how loud it should be. The concertmaster the conductor is going to show how short it should be played, and the concertmaster is going to show it by actually playing that short, and putting his energy into it. So the concertmaster has the combination of being a great player with a beautiful sound that everybody can rally around, but also having the flexibility to adapt to the conductor's instruction, and having the body language to bring everybody together, but also the authority that will come from his relationship to the music. So his authority is really crucial, in the same way as the conductor's relationship to the music will bring authority. The same thing for the concertmaster. How does the first violinist become the concertmaster? Well, he's picked through either an audition or cooptation, and it's usually because the conductor sees leadership qualities that he wants for the orchestra. When did you know you first wanted to be a conductor? What instrument do you play? Well, I played clarinet, and I absolutely loved it. I still have a great love for the clarinet. I miss it sometimes. I don't play very much at all anymore. But it is, I guess it was Mozart's favorite instrument, and I think I know why. When did Julien first know he wanted to be a conductor? Well, I went over that. So, what are the factors you must take in consideration when planning programs? How do you select guest soloists? So that's very interesting, because an orchestra is a group and a soloist is an individuality. And the audience needs that back and forth between connecting to a group and then having that individuality of the soloist. In some ways, the soloist changes the dynamic. If we think of a triangle, when we have the orchestra, the conductor, and the audience, the conductor's job is to connect the orchestra with the audience, right? So the orchestra and the audience would be on the inside of the triangle, and the conductor would be on the outside. Now, when it comes to a concerto with a soloist, it's the soloist that takes that star role, where the soloist is on the outside and the conductor is now with the orchestra on the inside. And the audience needs that, because that individuality brings something completely different from the music. Completely different, because instead of that individual being the conductor, that doesn't make sound, it's someone that makes sound. So it's a different relationship to the music, and that is crucial for the performance. And that is really what gives individuality to the concert, is the soloist. There are some concerts without a soloist, but they are rare. And most of the time, what brings that special thing to the audience and to the concert, is that soloist. So we are coming to our last question, and it's really a great one. It is said that the music is the universal language that touches every heart and soul. How has this time in quarantine changed the way you hear music? Isn't that a great question? I think right now, anytime I see people in movie getting together or being in groups, I feel like, oh my god, yeah, I remember the time when we could get together. And I'm sure it's the same for all of you, right? And the feeling of being together through the music is really something amazing. If you see an audience always before the concert, everybody's restless uh, and anxious, and they're coming out of the concert calm and happy, right? So this communion that we feel during the concert, this thing that we can share all together, is absolutely crucial, right? And with this confinement, with this quarantine, so I keep calling it confinement because that's what they call it in France. And so since I'm always in between the French and the American news, I changed my term. But so during this quarantine, um, we are isolated, and so we don't get that sharing. Yet the music still carries that information. Um, in some ways, some people say, well, when we are listening to music, we suddenly realize that we're not alone. Or we suddenly feel like we're not alone. And Daniel Barenboim would say that when we are performing or listening to music, we suddenly do not feel that we are mortal. And is it a magic effect of the music, or is it the fact that music is bringing a certain reality forward that we're not seeing the rest of the time? During a performance, I never feel like that I am mortal. I always feel like there is something beyond. Um, with the music, we certainly feel not together, and we certainly feel not mortal. And again, let's put it in that perspective. Are we feeling that because the music has this special quality, or are we feeling that because the music is revealing this to us? And the fact that we can still listen to recorded music still gives us that impression that we are all connected in some ways, and that the music is the vector for that the music doesn't necessarily create that connection, but it reveals it. That there's something about us that is not mortal, and that the music doesn't invent this, it just reveals it. And so the power of music is really, and in the way in which it is the universal language, is that you see, when we say it's the universal language, it's as if, like, French or Spanish at a similar quality, but French or Spanish doesn't make you feel necessarily immortal. It does you feel more connected to other people that speak French or Spanish. But the music has that quality that it makes us all one through the music, and it makes us all reveal something that's immortal about us. And how has this quarantine changed the way you hear music? I would say that it has made it more precious. It has made it even more important. It makes me think of all the people that are isolated and really feel isolated. And I feel so lucky that I can, listen to music and then I don't feel isolated. And then I realize that I'm not isolated, even if I'm geographically isolated. So I think this reveals to us the importance of the music, how crucial it is. Some will think of music as a luxury. Some will say it's not a luxury. I would say it's a necessary luxury. It's a necessity. It's a necessary luxury. It's something that is to the level of a luxury because of its importance, of its beauty, but it's also a necessity that that is crucial to Nietzsche says, without music, life would be an error, right? I think it says everything, that music and life are almost the same thing. And music is certainly, if all arts aspire to be music, music is certainly the art that gives the most meaning to life. We have all the other arts and philosophy and religion to help us understand music better, but music is certainly the greatest mystery and the most meaningful we have on this earth. So I look forward to seeing you all at the concerts when things come back to normal. But in the meantime, the Mid-Atlantic Symphony will be presenting many online events, whether they are virtual concerts or conversations with some of our artists, with myself, with some maybe of our management, and or our musicians. You will hear us soon on WBJC in Baltimore with excerpts from previous concerts, and look to some very nice recordings, some very nicely done recent recordings of our orchestra. As always, such a pleasure to share this time with all of you. And I look forward to next time. Thank you so much.